The development context of Becastled is marked by a mix of indie passion and challenges inherent to a small but ambitious project, which spent years in early access before its full release for PC and consoles. From the beginning, it was clear to me that the developer had a clear vision: to adapt the classic mechanics of city builders and defense strategy to a more relaxed environment, with a cartoonish visual proposal, moving away from realism and betting on that friendly look reminiscent of medieval cartoons. And honestly, I already liked this lighter tone because the market was saturated with heavy and serious strategies. So just for the proposal, there is already respect for the authorial courage. The Mana Potion Studios team is Ukrainian, and this in itself adds a particular flavor to the development journey of Becastled. The devs, even working in the context of political and social crises, managed to put the project on the air and keep it active, interacting closely with the community on Steam and listening to various feedbacks. The constant contact with players during early access made the game grow based on suggestions and patches, a philosophy that many large studios ignore, but here it is the rule. As someone who enjoys this involvement, I think it is one of the most admirable points of the project. The personal touch of Becastled is also present in the design decisions. The game avoids the excess complexity of traditional city builders and proposes a more cozy rhythm. That is, a welcoming atmosphere, with a clean interface and intuitive controls for those who are new to the genre. This does not mean that it lacks depth, far from it. It is possible to build well-elaborated strategies, but without a punitive learning curve. My impression is that Becastled positions itself as the perfect game for quiet marathons, but also challenges those looking for something more hardcore. Another highlight is the involvement of the Pingle Studio, which came in as a publisher to help bring the game to multiple platforms. This partnership greatly expanded the reach of the game, but without losing its indie identity. For a project that started small, reaching PlayStation, Xbox, and Switch shows that Becastled has managed to consolidate itself on its own merits. And honestly, I love when I see an indie growing like this. Not by ready-made formulas, but by conquering space based on word of mouth and sincere reviews. Becastled is the result of those indie journeys that win through the team's commitment to their dream. It was not a simple path. Many technical limitations, several negative feedbacks that needed to be adjusted, and that constant pressure to deliver something that really represents the devs' affection for their universe. As someone who has followed several small projects get lost along the way, seeing Becastled today so close to the complete dream is inspiring. Its development context is as important as the gameplay itself, because it reveals the power of small teams to make noise and conquer space for the value of the experience, and not for the size of the budget. Becastled works in an addictive cycle of construction during the day and defense during the night, and it is precisely this duality that makes the gameplay so strategic and challenging. During the daytime, you need to focus on expanding your small kingdom that starts only with a central castle, conquering new cells of the map to access essential resources such as wood, stone, gold, and food. What I find most interesting is that each cell of the territory has unique characteristics. Some have dense forests for wood, others have quarries, and you need to plan well which areas to conquer first because you can't embrace the whole world at once. It's the kind of decision that makes you think if it's worth expanding to that distant grove or guaranteeing the stone that is closer to your walls. The resource management system is super automatic, and this completely changes the experience compared to classic RTs like StarCraft. You don't micromanage each citizen individually. When you place a sawmill, for example, a free villager automatically goes there and starts working cutting wood. When you order the construction of a building, someone simply goes there and builds without you having to click on the guy. This makes the game much more relaxing and allows you to focus on what really matters, the macro strategy of how your kingdom will grow and defend itself. Particularly, I really enjoy this approach because it eliminates that unnecessary stress of drooling unit by unit, and lets you think like a true ruler who gives general orders and lets the people execute. The defense building part is where the game shows all its strategic depth and forces you to think in layers of protection. You start with simple wooden palisades, but soon you need to evolve to reinforced stone walls, with defensive towers where your archers are positioned, gates that can be fortified, and even siege equipment such as ballistae and trebuchets to destroy enemies before they get too close. The cool thing is that you can use the terrain in your favor. Placing your castle on top of a hill makes it difficult for enemies to access. Using rivers as natural moats, creating bottlenecks where they are forced to pass through multiple layers of defense. This freedom to build fortifications the way you want. taking advantage of the map, is something that few tower defense games can deliver with such quality. The military system goes far beyond simply training troops and throwing them on the castle wall. You transform your common citizens into specialized soldiers, archers who stay in the towers and walls shooting from afar, swordsmen who form the front line in melee combat, and lancers who are excellent against cavalry and large units. But it doesn't stop there. There's a whole upgrade system in the armory where you forge better equipment, more resistant armor, more lethal weapons, transforming your basic infantry into a respectable military force. And there is also the technological research where you spend resources to unlock permanent improvements. What I like is that you feel the progression. Those weak little soldiers from the beginning become true war tanks as you invest in them. The happiness of the citizens is an aspect of the gameplay that many people ignore, but that makes a brutal difference in the performance of your kingdom. Happy citizens work faster, and their soldiers fight with more determination during the night sieges. To keep morale high, you need to build taverns where people can relax, markets that give access to a variety of products, and decorations that embellish the areas. It's that complicated balance between investing in economy, army, and quality of life. Spending too much on taverns and decorations can leave your defenses weak. But ignoring happiness turns your kingdom into a zone of unmotivated workers who don't produce anything. This mechanic adds an extra layer of management that goes beyond the simple build and defend. The night sieges are the beating heart of the gameplay, and it is where all your daytime preparation is tested to the extreme. The enemies are not just dumb hordes that run in a straight line. They come organized with siege towers, battering rams to knock down gates, zombie giants that cause massive destruction, and even dragons in more advanced phases. What makes the sieges especially tense is that the attacks escalate progressively. They start with weak scouts on the first nights, but as your kingdom grows and becomes more prosperous, the enemies also become more numerous and dangerous, until they reach those apocalyptic sieges with multiple simultaneous attack fronts. During the night, you need to position your troops strategically. Decide where to concentrate the defense, when to use your heavy siege equipment, and hope that your walls hold until dawn. The cycle of expansion and territorial management is what gives longevity to the gameplay and keeps the experience always interesting. As you conquer new lands, you need to mine precious sunstones that are essential for advanced constructions and to push the forces of darkness further away. But there is a cruel trade-off here. The larger your territory, the more perimeter you have to defend, the more walls you need to build, the more troops you need to maintain. It's easy to get excited expanding too much and suddenly realize that you don't have enough army to cover all the vulnerable points. The game forces you to make difficult decisions about when to expand aggressively and when to consolidate your current defenses. And this constant tension between growth and security is what makes each game unique and unpredictable. Becastled is one of those games that pull for that childhood nostalgia, where castles and battles between light and darkness fueled a good part of our imagination. The plot, although simple at first glance, is efficient. You are the leader of the Kingdom of the Sun, a people marked by an ancestral feud with the lunar beasts, representatives of the forces of the night. The conflict between the two factions is what drives the whole plot, even if the game does not embrace a super detailed narrative, preferring to unfold the universe through the battles themselves, the visual theme, and the small events that arise during the construction of your domain. Right at the beginning, Becastled makes clear the tone of the adventure. The goal is to survive and expand your castle during the day, preparing for nights of siege in which the lunar enemies attack without mercy. The continuous cycle of building, defenses, training armies, and managing resources makes each dawn seem like a small respite amidst the constant tension of the lunar beasts' attacks. It is a story that is built in the lines, in the sweat and worry of keeping your people safe from the imminent threat. This clash between the sun and the moon, light against darkness, is a classic metaphor, but Becastled presents it in a charismatic way. It is not a game with cutscenes or deep dialogues, but there is a special charm in seeing the solar troops organizing and strengthening, while the lunar opponents arrive more and more intense each night. With each horde, the feeling is almost of a legend being written by force, a tale of resistance where each victory at dawn is a new page of glory for your kingdom. What I like most about the narrative of Becastled is precisely how it comes to life through the mechanics. No need for texts. Just seeing your farmers sweating to supply the city, engineers reinforcing walls and archers attentive to the horizon, you can already feel the climate of urgency and hope. The survival of the solar people also becomes yours, because each wrong choice, each misused resource can mean the end of the saga of your castle, making each game unique. Over time, each expansion in the territory, each improvement in the defenses, and each night overcome add layers to the story. I felt that there is an evolution not only of the castle, but also of the spirit of the inhabitants. The game encourages a personal connection, almost a commitment with your people, whether by managing parties, taverns to keep morale high, or by protecting workers amidst unexpected attacks. This humanizes the narrative, even if the script is minimal. Each citizen becomes part of a small daily epic. Despite not having great dramatic moments or epic twists, Becastled gains many points for the way it creates small personal stories with each new challenge. The simple act of seeing the walls resisting, soldiers gaining experience, and resources flowing brings that discreet pride of someone who saw a village become a fortress. Even knowing that the shadow of the next wave of attack is always approaching, you can feel that the weight of leadership, decisions under pressure, and the development of the kingdom mix and transform each game into a new emerging narrative. In the end, Becastled is a story about resilience. No matter how much the lunar beasts knock on your door, there is always a chance to rebuild, improve, and try again. It is the type of narrative that does not depend on dialogues, but on experiences. Each birth of a new turn, each reconstruction after a difficult night, ends up becoming more significant than any written script. Therefore, the story of this game stands out. It lets you be the true author of the Kingdom of the Sun, writing at each step a small epic of resistance and hope against the darkness. The graphics are those that catch the eye on first contact, mainly due to the cartoonish and minimalist proposal aimed at creating a medieval setting without taking itself too seriously. The color palette is vibrant with many blues, greens, and golden tones that end up bringing a more fantasy than realistic climate. And this, for me, makes the game quite welcoming, almost as if it were an invitation to play in a diorama of castles. Each construction seems to have been designed to work well as a visual piece, not only as a gameplay element, and even when the castle is under construction, the visual manages to remain attractive. Another visual point that pleases me a lot in Becastled is the intelligent use of lighting, especially in the transitions between day and night. The sunrise over the walls highlights the details of the textures and silhouettes of the structures, while the dusk brings a denser atmosphere, preparing for the defenses against attacks. The shadows are simple but very well applied, reinforcing this feeling of warmth during the day and tension at night. It is not a game that aims to impress you with ray tracing or hyper-realistic reflections, but it makes a point of being beautiful in its limitations. The animations of the characters and constructions deliver a vibe of living board game, with villagers who train and work visibly, even arrows appearing on the ground after the archer training. These are small details that bring personality and show the affection in the creation of each frame. I still see a simplicity in the character models, an intentionally cute design, which combines with the casual experience of creating and defending your castle. It is not for those looking for hyper-detailed NPCs, but for those who enjoy seeing their people growing and acting around the map, it is rewarding. The design of the scenarios also gets me for the use of the terrains, with hills and forests that really change how the castle appears in each game. The vegetation is not just decoration, it changes its appearance according to the seasons and contributes to a sense of visual progress as you expand your domain. This makes each game session seem unique, with the environment evolving along with your strategy. The terrain, even geometric, never seems too artificial, and this balance makes me enjoy even more setting up defenses in this world. If there is something that bothers me a little, is the proportion of humans in relation to the constructions, which sometimes seem miniatures near gigantic walls or towers. Sometimes this breaks a little of the immersion, especially when the action is frantic and there are many small NPCs running around the map. Personally, I tend to overlook this aspect because the rest compensates, but it is noticeable that it is something that could be adjusted for those looking for a little more realism in the scales. During the battle and siege situations, the visual comes to life even with so many simultaneous elements on the screen. Quantity of units, fire effects, trebuchets throwing stones, all this appears clearly and identifiably, even when the screen is crowded. But cons exist. There are reports of performance drops when many enemies appear at the same time, even in reasonably powerful cards, and this affects the visual with some lags and stutter, something that I hope will be improved. The graphics of Becastled stand out not for the advanced technology, but for the charisma. It is that type of visual that creates an identity. Just a screenshot is enough to know that it is Becastled. The details in the constructions, the vivid colors, and the care with the animations make it a game that seems made to be watched while playing. Becastled offers a castle building and defense experience that, from a performance perspective, presents an interesting mix of strengths and some notable limitations. The game runs quite smoothly most of the time, especially at the start of matches where the graphics are simple, stylized, and optimized for smooth performance, even on non-high-end machines. The low poly and cartoonish art style helps a lot with this, as it doesn't demand as much graphical power, giving that feeling of a light game, without noticeable stuttering or frame drops initially. However, as defenses expand and the quantity of units and enemies on the screen begins to grow explosively, the game starts to present significant performance issues. A critical point of the experience is the frame rate, which can violently plummet in more advanced waves, reaching almost unplayable levels, especially on mid-range PCs. This is due to the extra effort the CPU and GPU need to make to calculate the behavior of hundreds of simultaneous units, effects, and physics, something common in games of the genre, but which in the case of Becastled seems not to be fully optimized yet, resulting in lag and severe frame drops starting from approximately day 15 to 16 of the game. The loading time in Becastled is another aspect that deserves mention. Although initial loads are short and unintrusive, problems arise when trying to save and exit the game, with frequent freezes and even crashes. This negatively impacts the fluidity of the experience, as the feeling of instability when saving and reloading the match breaks immersion and generates frustration. Furthermore, this problem demonstrates that despite the game having a solid and interesting concept, it is still in its infancy in terms of technical polish, which may put off more demanding players. Another important factor that influences performance is the artificial intelligence and unit behavior, which, despite being a fundamental part of the experience, reveals certain problems that affect the fluidity of the gameplay. The AI presents unintelligent movement routes, causing soldiers and workers to get stuck on obstacles, which not only harms defense efficiency, but also momentarily freezes the game at processing peaks. This problem, although not completely freezing the game, becomes a constant source of frustration, especially in more intense battles where time is crucial. In my opinion, Becastled delivers an honest performance experience for an indie title with limited resources. One can feel that there is a balance between the game's ambition and the demanded hardware. The game doesn't require top-of-the-line machines, but suffers from the growing complexity of calculations and simulations that a prolonged battle involves. However, it is worth highlighting that the developers seem to be aware of many of these performance issues and have been implementing adjustments and updates that improve support on medium-spec machines. Even with these improvements, the game requires a certain patience from the player, as performance can vary widely depending on the chosen settings, such as resolution and the number of units on screen. For me, this performance experience is a reminder that the game's enjoyment should not be measured only by fluidity, but also by its ability to engage the player with its style and mechanics, even in the face of technical limitations. And Becastled, despite its stumbles, manages to fulfill this. Becastled is a game that delivers a strategy and building experience that mainly appeals to those who enjoy light, fun games with a more casual feel. If you are the type who likes to think about the placement of buildings, managing resources, and setting up defenses against attacks, you will find a charming and well-made game here. In my opinion, for those who are not extremely demanding about ultra-realistic graphics or complex systems, this simplicity works well, and the game brings a balance between challenging reasoning and being accessible. So, for those who enjoy a meditative and rewarding challenge, it's worth it at launch. My view is that it's worthwhile if the game's style really catches your attention and you want to enjoy the new features and updates right from the start. I think the charm of Becastled lies in its way of engaging the player with building and defense, instead of offering a hardcore competitive experience. It's a more zen game for sitting down and calmly building your castle, planning your defenses, and dealing with attacks in the right measure. This approach reminds me of games I really like in the style, like Stronghold or even the First Age of Empires, but with a more relaxed side. Therefore, I thought it would be nice to have it right at launch to start this strategic immersion immediately. For those who have never played anything similar, Becastled is a good entry point, because it doesn't require a complex mastery of mechanics or complicated controls. There are clear tutorials and the game follows your pace of evolution, which makes it suitable for those who want to start in the strategy genre, but also for fans of city builders who enjoy a light and tasty mix of management with action. It's a game that can appeal to adults who like light strategy and even teenagers who are looking for something different from the saturated shooters and RPGs. However, for those seeking an intense, highly competitive, or deep strategy experience, Becastled might seem superficial. It doesn't have the complexity and depth that classic strategy titles possess, and is more focused on relaxing fun than on complex mechanics. I myself noticed that I prefer it in short sessions, without the pressure of being the best or competing fiercely, just for the pleasure of building and defense. However, for those seeking an intense, highly competitive, or deep strategy experience, Becastled might seem superficial. It doesn't have the complexity and depth that classic strategy titles possess, and is more focused on relaxing fun than on complex mechanics. I myself noticed that I prefer it in short sessions, without the pressure of being the best or competing fiercely, just for the pleasure of building and defense. In summary, I would say that Becastled is for those who enjoy calm strategy, building, and defense in a relaxed and cartoonish atmosphere. If you are this person, buying at launch is a good idea because you enjoy the game in its most current version, with all the latest content and polish. If you prefer to avoid possible initial problems or don't like to pay immediately, waiting is a valid choice. For me, a fan of games that don't demand too much complexity but still require a bit of reasoning, launch is the right time to embark on this adventure.